Jake Murphy stared at his clipboard and wondered, not for the first time, how his life had gone so spectacularly wrong. 6 months ago, he'd been a perfectly content health and safety inspector for the city of Milwaukee, writing up restaurants for improper food storage and construction sites for missing hard hats. Simple. Predictable. Boring, sure, but nobody expected him to save the galaxy from its own stupidity. Then first contact happened, and he and I, Lewis per. Somehow through a series of bureaucratic mishaps that would make Kafka weep, Jake found himself appointed as Earth's representative to the newly formed Galactic Safety Commission. Apparently, when you're the only species that actually reads warning labels, you get volunteered for things. Inspector Murphy, announced Captain Vex Tar of the Zephyrian Empire, his forearms spread wide in what Jake assumed was meant to be a welcoming gesture. The alien looked like someone had crossed a praying mantis with a Christmas tree, complete with shimmering green skin and eyes that literally sparkled with condescension. Welcome aboard the Stellar Harmony, the most advanced vessel in our fleet. I trust you'll find everything in perfect order, as befits a civilization that mastered faster than light travel when your species was still discovering fire. Jake nodded politely and made his first note: excessive arrogance, potential safety hazard due to overconfidence. He'd learned that prideful people, or aliens, apparently tended to cut corners. The ship was undeniably impressive. Gleaming corridors stretched in impossible directions, holographic displays flickered with alien script, and the whole place hummed with the kind of advanced technology that made Jake's smartphone look like a rock with delusions of grandeur. It was also, Jake noticed immediately, a death trap waiting to happen. Nice exposed power conduits, Jake commented, pointing to a bundle of crackling energy cables running along the ceiling, completely unshielded. What happens if someone tall walks by? Captain Vextar's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Inspector Murphy, our crew is far too intelligent to accidentally contact. Right there, Jake interrupted, watching as a junior officer walking past had to duck to avoid getting his head fried. Boom. Lawsuit waiting to happen. Well, whatever you call lawsuits out here. Probably something with more tentacles. The captain's sparkly eyes dimmed slightly. I assure you, our technology is perfectly safe. We have never had an accident. Yet, Jake muttered, making another note. Where are your fire suppression systems? Fire suppression? Vextar's translator seemed to struggle with the concept. Inspector, we are an advanced civilization. We simply do not have fires. Jake stared at him. You don't have fires on a spaceship with exposed electrical systems and what appears to be a fusion reactor. Precisely. Our control systems are flawless. Aha. Jake's pen was working overtime now. And where are the safety railings around that reactor core I can see glowing through that conveniently open doorway? Safety railings would imply our crew might fall in. We find such suggestions insulting to our intelligence. Jake looked around the bridge, noting the complete lack of seat belts, emergency exits, or even basic handholds. When the ship took a gentle turn, half the bridge crew had to grab onto consoles to keep from sliding across the floor. Right, Jake said slowly. This is going to be a long day. 3 hours into the inspection, Jake had filled 17 pages with violations, and Captain Vextar was beginning to develop what humans would recognize as a nervous twitch in his left antenna. Your teleportation chambers, Jake announced, standing in front of a device that looked like a disco ball having an existential crisis, have no emergency stop button. Chief Science Officer Quindra stepped forward, her blue skin rippling with patterns that Jake's universal translator helpfully informed him indicated extreme intellectual superiority. She looked like a cross between a jellyfish and a college professor who'd given up on life. Inspector Murphy, she said, her voice dripping with the kind of patience reserved for explaining quantum physics to houseplants. The teleportation process is governed by 17 different quantum field equations. The probability of malfunction is approximately 1 in 4.7 billion. Great, Jake replied. What happens during that one time? That one time will never occur. The mathematics are quite clear. Jake pulled out his phone and showed her a video of a space shuttle exploding. The engineers who built this calculated the chance of failure at 1 in 100,000. They were wrong. People died. Now we have backup systems for our backup systems. Quindra's patterns shifted to what Jake was beginning to recognize as confused disdain. Your species builds redundancy into everything because you cannot trust your own technology? We build redundancy because we're not idiots, Jake corrected. Show me your emergency power systems. What followed was a tour that made Jake question how any of these aliens had survived long enough to develop interstellar travel. Their artificial gravity generators had exactly one backup, a smaller generator that would fail if someone sneezed on it wrong. Their life support system was maintained by a single computer that had never been updated because it worked perfectly for 300 years. What happens if it breaks? Jake asked. It will not break, Vex-Tar insisted. But what if it does? It will not. Hypothetically. There is no hypothesis in which it breaks. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on. Okay, different question. What's your emergency evacuation plan? The bridge fell silent. Various aliens exchanged glances that clearly said emergency evacuation plan in the same tone they might use for ritual human sacrifice. Inspector Quindra said carefully, "Our ship does not require evacuation. It is, as I mentioned, perfectly safe." "Your perfectly safe ship," Jake said, consulting his notes, "has exposed wiring, no fire suppression, and artificial gravity that could fail, and send everyone floating into the fusion reactor that has no safety barriers, life support maintained by a computer older than my grandmother, and teleporters with no emergency stops. But sure, perfectly safe." He moved on to the medical bay, where things somehow got worse. The surgical suite was open to the main corridor, meaning any passing alien could contaminate the area just by walking by. The medical storage contained dangerous drugs next to basic supplies with no separation or security. Most horrifying of all, their emergency medical protocols consisted of transport patient to medical bay and hope the doctor is available. What if your doctor is incapacitated? Jake asked Dr. Melani, whose species apparently evolved from something that looked like a cross between an octopus and a filing cabinet. That scenario has not occurred, she replied, somehow managing to sound snooty despite having a voice like a rusty gate. What if it does? It will not. Jake was beginning to see a pattern. Do any of you have contingency plans for anything? The medical staff exchanged those looks again. Finally, Dr. Melani spoke. Inspector Murphy, perhaps you do not understand. We are an advanced civilization. We have evolved beyond the need for such primitive precautions. You've evolved beyond the need for safety? We have evolved beyond the situations that would require it. Jake stared at her, then at his clipboard, then back at her. That's the most dangerously stupid thing I've ever heard, and I once watched someone try to fix a gas leak with a lighter. The alien medical staff rippled with indignation, but Jake was beyond caring about their feelings. He'd found 17 major safety violations just in the medical bay alone, including equipment that could electrocute patients, medication stored at the wrong temperature, and a complete lack of emergency power for life support equipment. Your superior intellect, Jake said, his voice dripping with sarcasm, has apparently made you immune to the laws of physics. Congratulations. You've achieved something that would make Einstein weep. By hour 6, Jake had assembled the senior crew in what they called their crisis management center, which was actually just a conference room with a really big table and delusions of grandeur. Captain Vex-Tar sat at one end, looking like someone had told him his favorite pet had been turned into a handbag. Chief Science Officer Quinn Draw kept shifting through color patterns that Jake's translator couldn't even begin to interpret, though he suspected they were all variations of deeply offended. "All right, people," Jake began, then caught himself. "Sorry, beings, entities, whatever. Point is, we need to talk." "Inspector Murphy," Captain Vextar began, his voice strained. "Surely these minor oversights." "Minor?" Jake interrupted, waving his clipboard. "Your life support system is held together with the galactic equivalent of duct tape and a prayer. Your reactor shielding has gaps big enough to drive a truck through. And your emergency protocols basically amount to panic and hope for the best. We have never experienced the failures you describe," Quinn Draw said, her patterns now a stubborn shade of purple. "Our technology is reliable." "Technology fails," Jake said flatly. "It's what technology does. The question is whether you're prepared for when it happens." He stood up and began pacing, a habit he'd developed during particularly frustrating inspections back on Earth. "Let me tell you about humans. We're not the smartest species, clearly, since you guys have faster than light travel, and we're still arguing about whether the Earth is round. We're not the strongest, or the fastest, or the prettiest. But we have one thing that apparently makes us unique in the galaxy." The aliens leaned forward despite themselves. "We assume everything is going to go wrong." Silence. "That's it?" Dr. Melani asked. "That is your great advantage?" "That's it," Jake confirmed. "We call it Murphy's Law. If something can go wrong, it will go wrong, at the worst possible time, in the worst possible way. So we prepare for it." He pulled out his phone again and showed them pictures. "This is a human airplane. See all those redundant systems? We have backup engines, backup computers, backup backups, because we know that someday something's going to fail. This is a human hospital. See those isolation rooms? Those backup power systems? Those emergency protocols posted on every wall? Because we know that someday things are going to go catastrophically wrong. This is a human nuclear power plant. See those containment vessels? Those safety systems? Those guys in hazmat suits? Because we know that nuclear energy wants to kill us, and we respect that about it." Captain Vextar's mandibles were clicking rapidly now. "But surely such extensive precautions are inefficient?" "You know what's inefficient?" Jake shot back. "Being dead. Or having your ship explode because you were too proud to install an emergency stop button." Quinn Draw's patterns had shifted to something that looked almost thoughtful. "You're saying that humans succeed not despite expecting failure, but because of it." "Bingo," Jake said. "We don't trust our technology because we built it, and we know how much we screw things up. Every safety regulation we have exists because someone died in a horrible and preventable way. We write warnings on coffee cups that say contents may be hot because someone sued after burning themselves. We put guardrails on bridges because people are idiots and will absolutely try to lean over the edge at the worst possible moment." "This seems pessimistic," Dr. Melani observed. "We prefer realistic," Jake corrected. "Hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Trust but verify. Measure twice, cut once. We have a million sayings that all boil down to the same thing. Assume you're wrong and plan accordingly." He sat back down and fixed them with what his mother used to call his serious face. "Your civilization has achieved incredible things. Faster than light travel, artificial gravity, teleportation technologies that we can barely dream of. But you've forgotten the most important rule of engineering." "Which is?" Captain Vextar asked. "It's going to break," Jake said simply. "Everything breaks. Everything fails. Everything goes wrong eventually. The only question is whether you'll be ready when it does." The conference room fell silent except for the hum of the ship's engines. Jake could practically see the gears turning in their alien brains as they processed this revolutionary concept of expecting the worst. "So, Quindrari said slowly, you are suggesting that we implement redundancies?" "Redundancies, fail-safes, emergency protocols, backup systems, safety margins, warning systems, and a healthy dose of paranoia," Jake confirmed. "Also, maybe some railings around the fusion reactor. You know, just in case." Captain Vextar looked around the table at his senior staff, then back at Jake. "Inspector Murphy, what you are describing would require a complete overhaul of our systems." "Yep," Jake agreed cheerfully. "It's going to be expensive, time-consuming, and probably annoying. But you know what's more expensive? Explaining to the families of your crew why you couldn't be bothered to install safety systems because you were too smart to need them." The aliens exchanged those looks again, but this time they seemed less dismissive and more concerned. "Where," asked Dr. Melani quietly, "would we even begin?" Jake smiled for the first time since boarding their ship. "Well, first we're going to talk about your reactor shielding. And then we're going to have a very long discussion about emergency procedures." Jake should have known that the universe had a sense of humor. He just finished explaining the concept of backup systems when every alarm on the ship decided to go off at once, creating a symphony of panic that sounded like an orchestra of dying robots. "What's happening?" he shouted over the cacophony. Captain Vextar was frantically pushing buttons on his command console, his forearms moving in a blur of increasingly desperate activity. "Cascade failure in the primary power coupling. The quantum flux inhibitors are destabilizing." "In English, please." "The reactor is having what you humans might call a tantrum." Through the transparent aluminum viewport, Jake could see sparks shooting from various parts of the ship's hull. The lights flickered ominously, and he could feel the artificial gravity wavering his feet kept trying to leave the floor at irregular intervals. "Okay," Jake said, trying to project calm authority while privately thinking that this was exactly the kind of cosmic irony he should have expected. "What's your emergency protocol for this situation?" The bridge crew stopped their frantic button pushing and stared at him. The silence was deafening, broken only by the continued wailing of alarms and the occasional explosion from somewhere in the ship's bowels. "Protocol?" Captain Vextar repeated, as if Jake had asked him to explain the mating habits of interdimensional beings. "Emergency procedures." "Contingency plans? What do you do when the reactor starts throwing a fit?" More staring. Chief Science Officer Quindrai's patterns had shifted to what Jake was beginning to recognize as complete existential panic, a sort of rapidly strobing yellow-green that made her look like a distressed Christmas tree. We trust the automated systems to resolve the issue," she stammered. "The automated systems that are currently failing?" "Yes." "Maybe." Jake looked around the bridge, where various aliens were running back and forth with no apparent purpose, making a lot of noise but accomplishing exactly nothing. It was like watching a fire drill organized by caffeinated squirrels. "Right," Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. "Everyone stop." The chaos continued. "Everyone stop." Jake bellowed in his best construction site foreman voice. The bridge fell silent except for the alarms, which apparently didn't respect human authority. "First thing," Jake announced, "someone turn off those alarms. We can't think with that racket." "But the alarms indicate danger," protested Dr. Melani. "We know there's danger. We're living in it. The alarms are just making it harder to fix the problem." Captain Vextar hesitantly pressed a button, and blessed silence fell over the bridge. "Thank you," Jake said. "Now, I need a status report. What exactly is failing, and what are the immediate consequences?" The crew exchanged confused glances. Apparently, the concept of organized crisis management was as foreign to them as the concept of preventive safety measures. "The power coupling is overloading," Quindra reported. If it fails completely, we'll lose all power, including life support. How long do we have? Approximately 12 minutes? Okay, what about manual overrides? Manual overrides? Jake stared at her. Ways to control systems manually when the computers fail? Our computers do not fail. Your computers are failing right now. This is unprecedented. Jake rubbed his forehead, feeling a migraine coming on. Okay, new question. Where's your engineering section? Deck 7, Section C, Captain Vextar replied. Good, you, and you, Jake pointed to 3 random crew members, come with me. Everyone else, start thinking about what systems we can shut down to reduce power load. And someone figure out how to manually vent the reactor coolant if we need to. Manually vent the coolant? Dr. Melani looked horrified. That would require someone to physically access the reactor chamber. Yes, it would. That's what manual means. But that's incredibly dangerous. You know what's more dangerous? Having your reactor explode because you were too scared to get your hands dirty. Jake was already heading for the door, followed by his hastily assembled engineering team. As they ran through corridors filled with flickering lights and the occasional shower of sparks, he couldn't help but notice that the ship had exactly 0 emergency lighting, no clearly marked escape routes, and emergency equipment that was stored in locked cabinets that no one seemed to have keys for. Has anyone actually practiced emergency procedures? Jake asked as they reached the engineering section. Practiced? One of the aliens replied. Why would we practice for something that would never happen? Because it's happening right now. The engineering section was a maze of incomprehensible alien technology, all of it beeping, flashing, or making ominous grinding noises. Jake couldn't read any of the displays, but he didn't need to. He could see the problem immediately. There, he pointed to a massive conduit that was glowing an alarming shade of red and occasionally shooting sparks. That's your overload. We need to reroute power around it. Impossible, declared the lead engineer, a species that looked like someone had crossed a spider with a pocket calculator. The automated systems handle all power distribution. Then we make it possible. Show me the manual controls. There are no manual controls. Jake stared at him. None? The automated systems are perfectly reliable. The automated systems that are currently trying to kill us all? These circumstances are highly unusual. Look, Jake said, his patience finally snapping. I don't care if these circumstances are so unusual that they violate the laws of physics. We have 8 minutes to fix this or we all become very expensive space debris. Now, either show me how to manually control this system, or I'm going to start pulling cables until something works. The threat of a human randomly disconnecting their advanced technology seemed to motivate the engineering crew. Within minutes, they'd located what passed for manual overrides, a series of crystalline interfaces that apparently responded to direct neural contact. Of course, Jake muttered. Psychic controls, because regular buttons would be too simple. With the alien engineers providing guidance and Jake contributing what he generously called aggressive problem-solving techniques, they managed to reroute power around the failing conduit. The ship's lights stopped flickering, the gravity stabilized, and the ominous grinding noises faded to a more comfortable level of background menace. Crisis averted, Jake announced, slumping against a bulkhead. For now. Captain Vextar's voice crackled through the ship's communication system. Engineering, what is your status? We're alive, Jake replied. Which, frankly, is better than I expected 20 minutes ago. As they made their way back to the bridge, Jake couldn't help but notice the shell-shocked expressions on the alien crew members' faces. They looked like people who'd just discovered that their house was built on a foundation of wishful thinking and good intentions. Inspector Murphy, one of the engineers said quietly, How did you know what to do? Jake shrugged. I didn't, but when things go wrong, you don't panic, you work the problem. You prioritize, you communicate, and you fix what you can fix while preparing for what might go wrong next. This is standard human procedure? This is Tuesday for humans. We assume disasters are going to happen, so when they do, we're not surprised. We're just annoyed. 2 hours later, Jake sat in the captain's ready room, which was apparently what aliens called an office with delusions of grandeur. Captain Vextar sat across from him, looking like someone had explained that his entire worldview was built on a foundation of cosmic naivety. Inspector Murphy, the captain began, his voice notably lacking its earlier condescension, I believe we may have underestimated the value of your recommendations. You think? Jake replied, not bothering to hide his sarcasm. What gave it away? The part where your ship nearly exploded, or the part where your crew ran around like caffeinated lemurs when things went wrong? Your species' chief science officer, Quinn Draw, interjected, her patterns now a subdued blue that Jake's translator labeled as grudging respect, but appears to have a fundamentally different approach to technology. We don't trust it, Jake said simply. We built it, so we know how much we screw things up. Every human engineer worth his salt operates on the assumption that Murphy's Law is not just a guideline, it's a physical constant of the universe. From Murphy's Law, Dr. Melani asked, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong, at the worst possible time, in the worst possible way, and probably when you're trying to impress someone important. Jake pulled out his phone and showed them more pictures. This is how humans build things. See this bridge? We assume that someday the biggest ship in the world is going to try to go under it during the worst storm in history, while the bridge is full of people. So we build it to handle 3 times more stress than we think it'll ever see. This is a human spacecraft. Well, what passes for one? See all these backup systems? We assume that everything is going to fail simultaneously during the most critical part of the mission. So we have backups for the backups and backups for those. This is a human nuclear reactor. We assume that every single safety system is going to fail at the same time, probably during a natural disaster, while being operated by the least competent person on the planet. So we build containment systems that can handle scenarios that would make horror movie writers weep. Captain Vextar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. This level of redundancy must be extraordinarily expensive. You know what's expensive? Jake countered. Losing an entire civilization because you were too cheap to install backup life support. But surely, Quindra said, such extensive precautions indicate a lack of confidence in your technology. Jake laughed. Lady, our technology is held together with duct tape, prayers, and the occasional swift kick. Of course we don't trust it. But that's exactly why it works. He leaned forward, warming to his subject. Every human safety regulation exists because someone died in a stupid and preventable way. We have warning labels on coffee cups because people are dumb enough to not realize that hot coffee is hot. We have guardrails on bridges because people will absolutely lean over the edge at the worst possible moment. We assume that any system will be operated by the least intelligent person possible, under the worst possible conditions, while everything else is also going wrong. This seems, Dr. Melani paused, searching for words. Pessimistic. T. We prefer realistic, Jake corrected. Hope for the best, prepare for the worst, trust but verify. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We have 1,000 sayings that all boil down to the same thing. Assume you're an idiot and plan accordingly. But this approach must limit innovation, Quindra objected. All these safety measures and redundancies, surely they slow down progress? Jake shook his head. Actually, it speeds it up. When you know your system won't kill everyone if something goes wrong, you're more willing to experiment. When you know you can fail safely, you're more likely to try new things. He gestured around the ship. You guys have amazing technology, but you're terrified to modify it because you know that if something goes wrong, you're all dead. Humans break things constantly, it's what we do. But we break them safely, learn from the failure, and build something better. The concept is, Captain Vex-Tar struggled with the words. Intellectually disturbing. Welcome to being human, Jake said cheerfully. We've turned paranoia into an art form. We assume everything is trying to kill us, and we're usually right. But how do you function with such constant fear? Dr. Melani asked. Jake shrugged. We don't call it fear, we call it healthy respect for entropy. The universe is actively trying to kill you at every moment. Stars explode, planets collide, black holes eat things, and your coffee maker is definitely plotting against you. The secret is not to be afraid of these things, but to be prepared for them. This is why humans are successful, Quinjaw asked. Because you expect disaster? Humans are successful because we embrace disaster. We plan for it, we prepare for it, and when it happens, we say, I knew this would happen, and get to work fixing it. Other species seem to think that advanced technology makes them immune to problems. Humans know that advanced technology just creates more interesting ways to die. Captain Vex-Tar was quiet for a long moment, his forearms folded in what Jake was learning to recognize as deep thought. Finally, he spoke. Inspector Murphy, what would you recommend we do? Jake smiled. First, we're going to install emergency stop buttons on everything. Then we're going to add backup systems, safety railings, emergency lighting, clearly marked exits, and warning signs in 17 different languages, including ones that use pictographs for species that communicate through interpretive dance. This will be a massive undertaking, Dr. Melani observed. Yes, it will. But you know what's more massive? Explaining to the Galactic Council why your entire species got wiped out because you couldn't be bothered to install safety equipment. Jake stood up and straightened his tie. Gentlemen, ladies, beings of indeterminate gender, welcome to Human Engineering 101. Class is in session, and the first lesson is simple. Everything is trying to kill you, and it's your job to be smarter than everything. 3 months later, Jake Murphy stood in the docking bay of the GCS Inevitable Disaster, a name he'd suggested, and somehow gotten approved, watching another alien vessel approach for inspection. This one belonged to the Carithian Empire, a warrior race that considered safety measures to be signs of weakness and had reportedly laughed when they received their mandatory inspection notice. Inspector Murphy, came the voice of Captain Vex-Tar over the comm system. The Zephyrian had been promoted to Chief of Galactic Safety Operations, a position he'd accepted with the enthusiasm of someone volunteering for dental surgery. The Carithian vessel Glorious Death is requesting permission to dock. Glorious Death? Jake muttered, making a note. That's not ominous at all. The Carithian ship looked exactly like what you'd expect from a warrior race, with no concept of safety, all sharp edges, weapon ports, and absolutely zero emergency lighting. It docked with the subtle grace of a brick hitting a window, sending vibrations through the station that made Jake's coffee cup rattle. Right, Jake said to himself, picking up his clipboard. Let's see what fresh horrors await. The Carithian captain was exactly what Jake had expected, 7 feet tall, covered in what appeared to be decorative scars and wearing enough weapons to outfit a small army. He looked like someone had crossed a Viking with a porcupine and given the result anger management issues. I am War Captain Thraxul of the Glorious Death, the alien announced, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer. I understand you wish to inspect our vessel for safety violations. He pronounced the words like they tasted bad. That's right, Jake replied cheerfully. I'm Inspector Murphy, and I'm here to make sure your ship won't accidentally kill everyone aboard due to criminally negligent engineering. War Captain Thraxul's face, what Jake could see of it under all the scars and ceremonial face paint, darkened. Inspector Murphy, the Carithian Empire does not concern itself with safety. We are warriors. We embrace danger. Jake said. Making another note. And where exactly do you store your weapons? Throughout the ship, as is proper for warriors. Including next to your reactor core? Especially next to our reactor core. It is a position of honor. Jake stared at him. You store high explosives next to your nuclear reactor because it's an honor? The weapons of our greatest heroes rest in the heart of our ship's power. The weapons of your greatest heroes are going to turn your ship into the galaxy's most expensive fireworks display if your reactor ever has a problem. War Captain Thrak-Zul drew himself up to his full, intimidating height. Are you suggesting that Carithian engineering is flawed? Jake looked around the docking bay, noting the complete lack of safety equipment, the exposed power cables running along the walls, and what appeared to be a weapons locker that was currently on fire and apparently supposed to be. I'm suggesting that Carithian engineering is going to provide me with enough material for a safety manual that'll be used as a cautionary tale for the next 1,000 years. 4 hours later, Jake had filled 23 pages with violations, and War Captain Thrak-Zul had progressed through the 5 stages of grief. He was currently somewhere between depression and acceptance, staring at a list of safety requirements that was longer than some novels. Inspector Murphy, the war captain said heavily, you are saying that our entire approach to ship design is fundamentally flawed? I'm saying your entire approach to ship design is fundamentally suicidal, Jake corrected. There's a difference, though I'll admit it's pretty subtle. But we are warriors. We do not fear death. That's great, Jake replied. Really, I admire the commitment. But there's a difference between dying gloriously in battle and dying stupidly because your weapon storage exploded and took out life support. One makes you a hero, the other makes you a Darwin Award recipient. Jake pulled out his tablet he'd upgraded from the clipboard after the 15th alien species had been confused by the concept of paper and showed the war captain some pictures. This is a human military vessel. See all those safety systems? The humans who built this weren't afraid of dying in battle, but they were terrified of dying because someone forgot to properly secure the ammunition. This is a human weapons storage facility. Those aren't warriors guarding it, those are safety inspectors. Because humans learned that the most dangerous thing about weapons isn't the enemy using them against you, it's your own weapons going off accidentally. War Captain Thrak-Zul studied the images with the expression of someone having their worldview systematically demolished. These humans, they embrace both courage and caution. Humans embrace the radical concept that bravery and stupidity are not the same thing, Jake explained. We'll charge into battle against impossible odds, but we'll do it with properly maintained equipment, adequate backup support, and emergency medical procedures that don't involve hoping really hard that nobody gets hurt. This is confusing. Look at it this way, Jake said. What's more impressive, defeating your enemy in glorious combat, or accidentally blowing yourself up before the fight even starts? The war captain's scarred face twisted as he considered this. Defeating the enemy, obviously. Right. So maybe, and I'm just spitballing here, maybe you want your ship to actually survive long enough to reach the enemy? 3 hours of explanation later, War Captain Thrak-Zul had reluctantly agreed to implement basic safety measures. Jake was just finishing up his report when his communicator chimed. Inspector Murphy, came Captain Vextar's voice, we have 17 more species requesting inspection schedules. Also, the Galactic Council has voted to make human safety standards mandatory for all member civilizations. Jake looked up at the ceiling and wondered, not for the first time, how his life had become so surreal. Any of them likely to be reasonable about this? The tentacled philosophers of Rigel VI have submitted a 40-page essay on why safety equipment represents an inherent lack of faith in the fundamental benevolence of the universe. Of course they did. The hive mind of Sector 12 insists that individual safety is irrelevant because they can simply grow new drones. Naturally, not. And the crystalline entities of the Vega system claim that as beings of pure energy, physical safety measures do not apply to them. Jake sighed and picked up his clipboard tablet. Whatever. Send them all the standard information packet. Title it Why the Universe is Trying to Kill You and How to Stop It from Succeeding. Yes, sir. As Jake walked back toward his office, he passed a group of newly graduated galactic safety inspectors, aliens from dozens of species who'd been trained in the revolutionary human concepts of expecting the worst and planning for disaster. Mirror. They carried clipboards, wore safety equipment, and had the slightly shell-shocked expression of beings who'd recently discovered that the universe was far more dangerous and far less forgiving than they'd previously believed. Inspector Murphy called out one of the graduates, a member of the crystalline entities who had somehow managed to fashion safety goggles for a being made of living light. We wanted to thank you for the training course on comprehensive paranoia, and you. Jake nodded wearily. Just remember the 3 fundamental rules. Everything is broken, everything is trying to kill you, and if it seems too good to be true, it's probably going to explode. We will carry these teachings throughout the galaxy, the entity replied solemnly. As Jake finally reached his office, he slumped into his chair and stared at the stack of inspection reports on his desk. Somewhere out there, across hundreds of star systems, alien civilizations were grudgingly installing safety railings, emergency exits, and backup systems. They were learning to expect failure, prepare for disaster, and assume that their technology harbored a deep and personal grudge against them. It wasn't the career path Jake had envisioned when he'd started writing up restaurants for improper food storage temperatures. But as he looked out his office window at the bustling space station now equipped with clearly marked emergency exits, backup life support, and warning signs in 47 languages, he had to admit there was a certain satisfaction in knowing that the galaxy was becoming a slightly less suicidal place to live. His communicator chimed again. Inspector Murphy, the philosophical collective of Alpha Centauri, is requesting a consultation. They claim their ship doesn't need safety measures because they've achieved a state of perfect harmony with the universe. Jake picked up his clipboard and headed for the door. Schedule them for next Tuesday. And make sure to pack extra forms. Something tells me this is going to be a long inspection. After all, someone had to keep the galaxy from accidentally killing itself. And apparently that someone was a guy from Milwaukee who just wanted to make sure people didn't die from preventable stupidity. The universe, it seemed, had a sense of humor after all.